It is my pleasure to welcome you to this Wheaton conversation with our Spring 2024 Fellows, Anna Boothe, Nancy Cohen, and Jaime Guererro. I'm Pamela Weichman, the Director of Education and Artist Services at WheatonArts. I'm a white female in my 30s with long brown hair and blue eyes, and I am wearing a green shirt, and my background is blurred. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm broadcasting from Southern New Jersey, which I recognize as traditionally the land of the Lenni Lenape. Wheaton Conversations is presented by PNC Arts Alive, the United Nations International Year of Glass, and the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass. We thank them for their support. Through membership, donations, and shopping at shop.wheatonarts.org, you can show your support. Please consider exploring these options so we can continue to offer programs like these. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the program, Katie Murphy. Some of you may know Katie. Katie is the glass studio manager at WheatonArts. She has been working with glass since 2009 and received her MFA from Virginia Commonwealth University in 2018. She has taught the material of glass to students ranging in age from middle school to degree-seeking university students across the East Coast. Katie, thank you for joining us for this conversation and for being our moderator.
Thanks, Pam. I'm excited to introduce the fellows. I'm going to give a very brief introduction to the fellows and let them really talk a lot more about their processes. So I'll start with Anna. She's been working in glass since 1984. And she is a very prolific artist. She has work in permanent collections of their Berger Mahler Museum, the Corning Museum, the Racine Art Museum, Tacoma Museum, and her decorative artworks have been featured and are represented by 15 galleries nationwide. Boothe was an instructor at Tyler School of Art for 16 years and also helped develop and chaired Salem Community College's glass art program. Excited to have you here. We have two collaborators here, so you'll see Anna and Nancy together on the screen. They'll be talking about their fellowship together. Nancy's work in glass and handmade paper examines resiliency in relation to the environment and human body. Her work was recently featured in New Jersey PBS State of the Arts. And this past fall, Cohen was a fellow at the McDowell Colony. And in 2022, she was the recipient of the Murray Reich Distinguished Artist Award from the New York Foundation of Arts, a Works on Paper Fellowship from the New Jersey State Council of the Arts, and the Denmobe Fellowship from the Pyramid Atlantic Art Center, as well as a studio residency grant from the Women's Studio Workshop. And then you'll also see on your screen Jaime Guererro, who is a Mexican-American glass sculptor, currently living in Pittsburgh, but originally from Los Angeles. He grew up in a predominantly Latino neighborhood, which helped shape his views around race, identity, and social equity. Guerrero attended the California College of the Arts, where he discovered glassblowing, and has, as well as our other two artists on the screen, several accolades on his belt as well, including 2 Sachs Fellowship Awards for Outstanding Artistic Achievement, and most recently a solo exhibition at the Pittsburgh Glass Center, which was voted the top 10 in Western Pennsylvania. So we're very excited to have you all here today.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to start talking about Nancy's and my work. Together, we've known each other for about 25 years, been good friends, and started collaborating together in 2012. And although our work is quite different, our collaborative work brings together integrates our studio practices and our individual studio sensibilities and shared interests. As an introduction, we each decided to show 3 works and talk about those 3 works before we launch into why we're here. I do a lot of different types of work, but I selected 3 that I think are indicative of what I'm working on now. This is a large vessel form, lidded vessel form called Am4us, spelled capital AM, capital FOR, capital US. So it's a metaphor, excuse me, it's a pun on the word amphora. It's comprised of iconography from 2 different cultures, one being ancient Greco-Roman culture combined with iconography, the hand mudra from Buddhist work that denotes wisdom. I chose to show you two flacons, two perfume bottles, which are indicative of a large body of work I made in another collaboration in Italy several years ago with two other artists, side-by-side collaboration, very different from a more integrated type of collaboration that Nancy and I do. But this was with a draftsman and an artisanal perfumer. And we had several shows in the Veneto region, just west of Venice, in several different villas. And we were each individually, but side by side, riffing on the character or responding to the characteristics of each of these villa. And this is a grouping that I call it a talisman grouping. I make small objects that are interpretations or just responses to objects that I see that I like in my travels from different cultures, usually ancient type cultures, and then I take those parts and interpret them and make them my own, and then I often put those together in different groupings and install them on a wall.
I'm Nancy. I moved to New Jersey about 30 years ago. I live in Jersey City, and I became really interested in the relationship between the rivers in New Jersey and the industries and neighborhoods and communities developed around the water. So this is a large-scale installation in handmade paper that I did for the Noise Museum based on the Mullica River. That was the first river installation. And this was later a piece of a large installation in paper and glass called Hackensack Dreaming, about the Hackensack River. And this is a very recent piece called Approaching the Tree. On my left, so I'm not sure whether it's your left or right, is the piece shot in my studio, but it was a site-specific installation for the window of a gallery where I had an exhibition that just closed, and it was entirely in glass, and it was inspired by having seen an enormous tree growing on the side of a brick wall, the roots exposed on the wall in Taiwan, where I was for an exhibition earlier this year. And in general, I'm really interested in the relationship of nature and what it juxtaposes against. So sometimes it's industry, sometimes it's a wall, whatever our natural world meets with the opposite. So about 25 years ago, I had been doing a lot of work about the relationship of myself and people to the architecture that supports us. So thinking about how a human being feels comfortable, where they feel safe, how they're protected, how they're vulnerable. So I made large scale work based on hammocks and hospital gurneys and parade floats. And I kept having this idea about a wheelchair, a fragile wheelchair that didn't look exactly like a wheelchair. I had a small bentwood chair in my studio and some bicycle wheels leaning against it. And I kept trying to figure out how to make that feel ethereal. And I had the idea to make it in glass, which I had no clue how to do. I had been using glass by, getting things like wine glasses at the Salvation Army, smashing the stems off and gluing them together, but had never made anything in glass. And a friend recommended Anna to me, who had done some casting classes at Urban Glass where my friend worked. And we started collaborating on this piece. And I made the waxes. Anna told me how to work in wax. I had never done that. I made the waxes. Anna made the molds. We did the finishing of the elements together. And the project Anna had originally said was going to take 3 to 6 months, took 2 years. So during those 2 years, we became really good friends. And either we would never have spoken to each other again, or we would have been friends for life. And we ended up having tons of things in common in our personal lives and in our interests and in our approach to making work, even though our work was very different. And from there, we were trying to think how we might continue to work together on work that was jointly ours. Shall I?
Yes. So fast forward to 2012, and we decided we really wanted to work together. We thought we would be a good pair in doing so. So right at that time, the Corning Museum of Glass, the studio at the Corning Museum of Glass, was offering a new residency program, and that was for collaboration. And they were only offering it to people who had taught there before, and then you could apply as someone who had taught there, but then you could have anyone join you in that proposal. So it was the perfect opportunity, and I had taught there quite a few times. So I invited Nancy when we just through a lot of discussion came up with a joint project that incorporated things, topics that we enjoyed. And that topic was something rather esoteric, but we both enjoyed Buddhist work. And specifically, we came to realize we really loved Buddhist Thangka painting. And we didn't know what Thangka painting was, so I don't expect anyone attending necessarily knows what they are. But we were looking at mostly 14th, 15th, 16th century Thangka painting, and they're basically cosmological meditation paintings that are comprised of Buddhist symbology, iconography. Many of them are very ordered, and others are looser in sort of a landscapey type sense. So we had a 10-day residency, made a ton of work, and over the years it expanded. And I think this is where you want to
So at Corning, we were starting to play with the elements, and here it was probably, you see our sizes, 10 feet long, maybe 10, 15 feet long. So over the next year, we worked on it in my studio and then showed it in a calligraphy gallery in Chelsea. And here it was 30 feet on one side and then curved around, and it had expanded and grown. And in this case, it was shown in kind of your standard white box gallery. And it's been really interesting to us to have the opportunity to show this piece in various locations where it kept growing. So here's some details. So we did use, sorry for backing up, we used a range of glass processes. We had the opportunity at Corning, which we have again at Wheaton, to sort of push how we could express ourselves, our ideas in a range of ways using different techniques and different methods. So here it is shown at the Philadelphia Art Alliance, which is kind of a historic mansion exhibition space in Rittenhouse Square, downtown Philadelphia. And here it moved from like the Chelsea Gallery to a house with molding and decorative ceilings and beautiful woodwork. So it changed the context of the work. And then we were invited to show it at the Philadelphia airport, where it was going to be, in a hallway where people were passing quickly, and, McDonald's across the hall and fluorescent lighting. And we were thinking about how do we make this piece feel new, but also make people stop and look at it with all the sort of saturation. And originally we had talked about a colored background and had dismissed it. So we revisited that when we were thinking about the airport. And here it became a 40-foot long piece, I think, inside this glass case. And then we had one more opportunity to show it about a year and a half ago at the Bergstrom Mahler Museum of Glass in Neenah, Wisconsin, on a 60-foot wall that curved around
13 feet high.
Yeah. So we once again grew the piece to expand to a new space. So it's kind of reinventing and stretching and thinking about spacing differently. And we're very happy at the end of that 6-month exhibition that the museum acquired the piece, and it was time for us to think again.
To empty our storage areas. So in conjunction and adjacent to the show at the Philadelphia Art Alliance, we were given another gallery space. And because we had already made that piece of work, we were given the opportunity to create discrete sculptures and new work to show. So this was the beginning of a new body of work. This particular piece is called Cradled. This is called Pollination. And this is a wall piece called Veer.
We also, much of the work in the original installation was made in kiln casting, starting with wax molds. And we had saved some of the wax molds we hadn't used and ended up using these molds to do a series of monoprints. So the same forms that we were casting in glass, we then used to press into a matrix of gelatin and did a series of prints, kind of, pushing the same idea in a different way. We collaborated on those. And then we did a series of larger sculptures, sort of installations where we combine the prints and the sculptural elements. So here it's more sculpture, less prints, but in one giant piece called Cumuli. And here in another exhibition of the Princeton Arts Council, a wall of prints with small sculptural elements, connecting the different pieces.
So 12 years later, we had finished this project. We had shown it as many times as we were really wanted to show it, and we're really happy that it's at the Bergstrom Mahler at this point. And I think we were ready. We've been talking about it for a while, and we were ready to embark on a new project. And so we didn't know what that would be, but then we got the email, apply for a Wheaton residency, and we thought this is really a perfect time to see what we could do and create a proposal so we could make work that we could not make in our individual studios, or going back and forth, where we could be in a new facility and really create new investigative and exploratory work, using new techniques and methods, and working with the staff at the Wheaton facility. So we decided to pull together our shared interest in the history of glass, and specifically in the region, which I'm from the Philadelphia area. Nancy's an hour and a half outside of the Philadelphia area, but also from New Jersey. So we decided to put together some sort of proposal that would include basically Nancy's interested in the ecology of rivers, my interest in overall experience in glass, and also my history of working with the scientific glass community at Salem. So putting together three different factors. So one is the history of glass, another one is contemporary scientific glass, and the other is the local Maurice, I hear it's called Morris down here, the Morris River. So in order to prepare for the proposal, we did a number of things. We visited the Archaeology Center in Philadelphia along the Delaware River, which is a small repository of a small space that houses glass remnants that were found in a dig underneath I-95. And in that space is really the vestiges of one of the first successful glass factories in the US, called Dyetville. This is an 18th century, early 1700s factory. We spoke with Mary Mills, the curator of the Museum of American Glass here at Wheaton, and she was extremely helpful. We visited the museum. We did a lot of library research. We went to Chem Glass and met with one of the owners at Chem Glass in Vineland, New Jersey. And we took sort of a long couple-day field trip, just exploring southern New Jersey and the rivers, and walking trails, trying to locate old factories. In a lot of cases, there were none. Just we would go to a place and we'd reach a dead end, or we'd reach a plaque. But nonetheless, we spent a lot of time doing a lot of background work. I think
this is the Maurice River, which it has been sort of a reference. We keep coming back to the idea of the river, where which was the source of the materials that the glass was made in, the sand that helped make the glass in this area and helped transport the glass, and along which many of the early glass factories in this part of New Jersey were based. So we came to Wheaton, and we had the idea to use as much as possible recycled glass, and we were thrilled when Katie took us to see the glass graveyard back here, where we could work with, all the discarded glass we wanted. And then what we were thinking about was how to use found glass, recycled glass, to create the glass of the original palette that the early colonial glass in this part of New Jersey was in, which were blues and greens, celadons, and a little bit of amber. And as we understand it, that was the natural color of the glass because of the minerals in the sand. But we were playing around, experimenting with how to capture those colors using the materials we could find. So these are some pictures from the Museum of American Glass here. We weren't trying to duplicate any of the forms that we saw, but we were really interested in the early glass and the simplicity of the forms, and in certain elements, the handles really spoke to us. The decoration on the surface spoke to us. And we were also really interested in the kind of in the mason jars and in some other kinds of objects, the way metal implements worked as adjacent to the functional objects. And I don't have any idea where this came from, but there are barrels and barrels of this stuff we were told was called puck in the graveyard. And we collected it on a number of occasions. We called it puck, maybe. They look like hockey pucks, that's it. So they were clear glass discs, and we needed them in small pieces. So we fired them up high, and then when they were at 500 degrees, 800 degrees, and poured water in them, and then we smashed them up with a hammer to make little pieces that we've been using in all the work.
So this is something I remember from decades ago when I first came to Wheaton. And this is the entry room to the studio, which is filled with these amazing molds. And I think at the time, I didn't even know what they were years ago. But as a fellow, we said, can we use those? And we were, there was only one thing we weren't allowed to do with them. But other than that, we were told yes. And so we employed quite a few techniques, and we have employed quite a few techniques since we've been here. I'm primarily a kiln caster, so that's the first thing I really want to do. So these molds are primarily used, or were made for blowing or for pressing, and for pressing glass into them. So instead, we painted wax into them to create a wax positive form. And then instead of making the form that originally would have come out of that mold, we were, changing it and incorporating different parts in different ways with other parts made by different techniques. So these are just some visuals of some of the molds that we made, some of the waxes that we made. And this is showing pressing glass into one of those bottle forms into a plaster mold. I think we've run maybe 30 kilns since we've been here, something like that. And right now we have 4 more days here. But it's been wonderful. Never had an opportunity like this to make so much work in such a small period of time, concentrated period of time. So this is an example of one of our kiln loads. These are just some pieces. We're making elements here. We're not making finished work yet. We're making as many parts as we possibly can while we're here.
And I'm just going to pipe in, if you can see on the chart, old green graveyard, pale blue graveyard, new graveyard. So these were different glasses that we found. We're testing in the molds to see how they fired, what colors they were. So it's been sort of experiments like a mad scientist. So when we visited Chem Glass, one of the owners, Phil Surdum, was, spent, I'd say, at least half a day taking us around, showing us everything. It was amazing. We loved it. And we saw people working, we saw the different forms. And then he happened to mention that sometimes things come back when they're broken, and he showed us where they fix them. And he said, sometimes we can't fix them, usually we can. And then Anna said, well, any chance we can have the ones that can't be fixed? And he said, sure, I'll save them for you. And then we were in touch, and he burned off, I'm not quite sure what that means, the chemicals. He cleaned them for us. And then when we came up to Wheaton, he had 10 boxes full of scientific glass for us. So that they're so beautiful. And because they're already damaged, we could do whatever we wanted with them. So we've been experimenting with them in various ways. So we've been slumping them. And right now they're being in these photos on one side before it slumped, on the other side after it slumped, on molds that I made out of clay before we came, evoking some of the sort of crushed remnants of forms we'd seen at the archaeology center. So that's what the forms are based on. And then you can see we've filled them with, I think in this case, vermiculite and pigment, and then the other side where they're slumped. And on the left, you can see, well, I don't know if it's your left, but there's forms, the scientific glass as they are, where we put different things inside them, crushed glass, pigment,
Washes of
copper carbonate, and on the right, so the green form, the long green form, rounded green form becomes that sort of squashed black form on the other side. And when we opened the kiln, we were ecstatic because it looked like it was almost like an ink painting. So we're interested in taking the forms, keeping their integrity so that you reference the fact that they're scientific glass, but that transforming them into something that has changed, right? So they're nodding to what it was, but pointing to something else in the same way that with the molds, the original molds, we're referencing an early technology or a different technology and putting it to something new. So here's an enormous form filled with the copper carbonate Anna's holding, and on the right, how it became after it was slumped. And this is
like a beach ball.
yeah, and this is one we've been working on. This is our third try with these forms, trying to get them to collapse just the way we want in the kiln. And hopefully, this is the one that works. So there's vermiculite in the forms. At this point, they've fused together, so they're a solid form and they're starting to pucker. But we had discovered in a different firing that if we put vermiculite inside and fired it, the inside surface would get all textured. And so we're after that.
We've also been doing sand casting. We're not necessarily as much hot shop people. So, and also in the hot shop, it requires a lot of help. So the staff in the studio here has been more than amazing in helping enable us to do things that we don't normally do. And we can point and clip and do simple things, but they're doing all the work. Anyhow, and we like the fact that we can use similar shapes across many different techniques so that we can get different looks. So we can juxtapose form that has interesting texture and sort of plays off of each other, almost in a subconscious way. So in order to create these forms, we've taken some of the scientific forms and pressed them into the sand and incorporated copper and other materials using rope in shapes that are sort of like a river contour.
And in the mold room is a machine that's called, I think, a sidearm press that was used, I guess, at Wheaton Industry to make pressed glass years and years and years ago. And we asked if we might be able to use it, and they said yes. And we had no idea how complicated it was. They had to take down the door and move this giant thing, and it had been used by an artist once before. And so this is Tiff on the left and Jeremy trying to figure out how to make this work, which wasn't so simple. And Anna pulling the arm on the other side. And we just wanted to mention everybody here to thank them so much for all the help that they've given us. So I'm going to try to do this in order. Alex, Katie, Patty, Tiffany, Kendall, Jeremy, Josh, and Ish have all been amazing, creative, kind, resourceful, positive, brilliant, and like amazing problem solvers. And I told Katie this, it's the smoothest, nicest group of people working together I have ever seen. So we are so grateful. So so some of the molds were made for blowing into, and some of the molds were made for pressing. And here's Patty pouring the glass into one of the press molds. Josh is heating up something behind it. I don't even know what. And I can't tell who this is, but here's the dish of the top of a candy dish coming out of the mold, being ready to go into the kiln. And on one side, you see all of these forms we've made, some complete, some in pieces. In pieces is fine. I think we're going to slice them up anyway to combine them in different ways. But we were interested in which pieces might actually be in the museum. And we talked to Diane Wood, the librarian, and
Fallon Ward.
And
Fallon Ward.
thank you, Fallon Ward. If they had these objects, and in a second they opened a catalog from Temple Glass that had been bought by Wheaton Industries way back, and both of these forms, the top one was one of the things we cast with the press, and the bottom one was something we had done with the lost wax casting. So it's been great.
Okay. We also need to send a great shout out to Jason Gordon, who's here as a volunteer flame worker, a master Boro worker. And we wanted to incorporate just beautiful line drawings in cane. And neither one of us could do that, but we could draw it with a pen and really easily, and we could make it in rope really easily. But several hours of work later, we got one in glass.
Whoops, sorry.
Thank you, Jason. He made several of these for us to incorporate into final pieces.
And we also had an idea about, we've thought about the river. You know, every time we put anything together, the river is on our mind. There's pictures in the studio, but we were thinking, can we make a drawing of the river? And first Jason, and can we make it big? And first Jason thought he might be able to make it in borosilicate, but it didn't work that way. But like, the approach here is don't give up, let's find another way. And so we made, with Jason's help once again, a jig where we drew the Maurice River, that's the long drawing, and a different perspective drawing of the river in the shorter piece of plywood, carved out the center, put them back together, and have been trying. It took 2 days again of trying. The first day, pouring hot glass that went through an optical mold, not pouring it, blowing a bubble, putting it in an optical mold and trailing it through the wooden opening. And we're very thrilled that on day 2 this morning, we did it without like any problems whatsoever, and they're beautiful, and we're so excited. So again, thank you to everybody.
Okay, so as I said before, we're not leaving here with finished work. We're leaving here with lots of really interesting parts. And so we have mocked up, we're working on maybe 10 to 15 pieces that we are planning, and of course they could change. But right now we decided to show you, I think, four mock-ups. And here's some examples using some forms that you've already seen.
So this is a grouping of the slump forms. Maybe just quickly what the process is.
And this one incorporates almost most of the processes. So it's a ready-made scientific glass form, a line drawing in Boro that was made by Jason, kiln cast sort of handles to the right, and then sand cast form on the bottom, and then the striated piece in the middle. The vessel form is also cast with the puck.
And we're also playing around. This is 2 shots that, if you can kind of imagine, go together, you can see where the overlap is, that we're playing around with as the start of a larger installation. And we did this on a table. And it's thinking of specifically about the form, again, the form of the river, the movement of water, and the transportation of objects in the river, because we did understand that one of the reasons that the glass industry developed along waterways was it was the safest way to move glass in the early days. So again, using a range of methods in this piece.
So we're looking forward to sharing the finished work with everyone. Maybe 6 months, it may be longer, but we'll happily do that. And once again, a big thank you to the staff, Mary Mills, Ellen Ward, and Diane Wood, for such great help for the project.
And finally, we wanted to give a shout out to our fellow Jaime Guererro, who we shared a house with, and our studio was next door, and who never failed to surprise us. One day we found him this way.
I didn't know you share that. That's funny.
Thank you for sharing and for such kind words about the staff. That was really nice to hear. I know that Jaime is going to jump in, but I did have a question before that. You've been working together for so long. How do you successfully make decisions together? Like, I'm just very curious about that. There's so many components.
We get along really well. I would say that's, that we have good chemistry, for lack of anything else. Do you want to say?
Yeah, I think it's also that, sometimes we agree, and sometimes if someone says, I really don't like that idea, or I don't think that's going to work, if it's not that big a deal, the other person says fine. And if it is a big deal, if I really want to do something, I really want to do it, and Andy doesn't want to, or vice versa, then the other one says, let's try it and see how it goes. So it's like sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, and the other person doesn't care that much and is willing to let it go. And then if one of us cares enough, then we go forward and see where it gets.
The
So
other aspect of that is I think we ask each other everything.
Mhm.
I would say in the collaboration, we don't really go off on our own rogue.
yeah,
No,
it's
we always
it's pretty
compare
much
and
a
contrast.
steady conversation. And
It works.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
We're grateful.
Yeah, I feel like it's an interesting, I think it's interesting when artists work together because it is this constant compromise and dialogue, and
Mhm.
and it's hard to do that when you're in the process of making sometimes.
It
So
is.
it's nice to see that.
Yeah. I keep saying that this is I've done a number of collaborations, as has Nancy has as well. And this is the most integrated collaboration I've ever done.
Mhm.
And that's why I said earlier, I've done collaborations that are side by side where everyone's sort of working separately, and then you come together with whatever you were inspired by, but with your separate objects. And they don't always as successfully inform each other. And what Nancy and I do, we touch everything. Both of us touches everything. So it's a completely different type of collaboration.
Yeah, it seems very unique. And I'll echo what Pam just mentioned in the chat. If anyone has any questions, you can use the Q&A feature, and we'll have time at the end to answer everyone's questions.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in. My presentation is going to be a little different than Ann and Nancy's. I'm just going to kind of show some of my work from the past, and then talk a little bit about what I did with my residency at Wheaton and how that evolved. This piece here is a life-size glass sculpture I did at the Corning Museum of Glass. It was actually the first life-size child sculpture I made hot. And I was using the team at Corning. And the reason why I have it is because I don't have any good shots of the piece I did at Wheaton Village. I also made another sculpture of a life-size child whose name is Hind Rajab. And I think there might be a slide of her further on. I'll talk a little bit about that piece later. So early on, I was really interested in culture and my past, and started doing research, kind of like an archaeological approach to researching culture through process and form. So I was really kind of interested in creating these objects that had been made in the past, but recreating them in glass, and giving them a different look, a different feel, but with the same essence. So I'm just gonna kind of go through some of these really quickly. I won't talk too much about them. This is one piece that I really like. It's a woman from the Chipicuero culture. And I was really excited about this piece because it actually made it on the cover of American Craft magazine. And I really feel like I captured an essence here. But also I took this photo, so I was experimenting with photography, and I actually learned a little bit about taking images. So I'm kind of proud of both the image and the piece. So there's another piece from the Mesoamerican work that I've done. Here's a wall installation of idols that was at the contemporary, this is a contemporary, Skidmore Contemporary Art Gallery in LA. And this exhibition was in conjunction with the Getty Museum's kind of thing that they put out that was, so all these exhibitions were related to a mandate that the Getty Museum put out, and it was kind of related to that. So I had two exhibitions going on at that time, in that year. I can't remember exactly what year it was. It's another shot of that. Cheech actually came to that exhibition, Cheech Marin, wherever, I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. He's a big Chicano art collector. There's another piece in that exhibition. This piece is called La Venta. and it's all these shamans getting together in a meditation form. And the idea that some historians think that they kind of came together to offer like well-being to the universe. They're perfectly aligned and were found in the ground 6 feet under in this formation. So I kind of recreated the scene and made the pieces actually larger than the actual scale. Next slide, please. So I guess I was also kind of interested in creating art that speaks about a contingency of people that are not usually represented in museums or fine art kind of constructs or places. So I decided to kind of create sculptures that speak about, Latino culture or pop culture or gang culture. So it's creating a figure and a character through gesture in glass. I kind of learned or started practicing doing enamel painting on glass to create just kind of like a whole nother effect, playing with tattoos and maybe images on shirts and kind of giving the sculptures like another dimension. I did this piece at Jeremy Popalka and Stephanie Trenchard's studio in Wisconsin. So them and I were collaborating. I was kind of collaborating with them, teaching them about sculpting techniques, and I was learning enameling techniques from Stephanie and Jeremy. This piece was shown it's shown in a couple of different places, but it was purchased by the Oakley Museum for their permanent collection. And it's basically talking about the rich culture, the charro traditions that exist in Mexico. And my uncles were this piece is basically nostalgic. It's about a memory that I have of going to Mexico for the first time and seeing my uncles in their uniform of charros and seeing them on horses. And when you were in a rodeo, the point system was putting a paper mache flower on your horse as a way to measure point, to give you points for whatever rodeo kind of tricks you were doing. And my uncle on my mom's side was a champion charro of her town, and on my dad's side, in his town, his brother was a champion charro of their town. So early on, like it was my notion of like just heroes, because being Latino, you don't really have the best representation in any type of media. So going to Mexico and seeing this for the first time was just kind of like a glorifying kind of impact. So I created this piece to commemorate that moment called Charros y sus Caballos. This is a sculpture. Thanks, Mary. This is a sculpture I had an exhibition at a gallery in Los Angeles, California, Trópico de Nopal. And it was basically talking about the prison industrial complex, how the United States has the most people incarcerated, and it's disproportionately Black and Latino. So we by far have more people incarcerated than the next 3 or 4 countries put together. So I created this sculpture, this installation that is kind of the idea of the moment you get arrested. So it's like, put your arms behind your back. So it's kind of ethereal. It kind of disappears, but it had a pretty good dichotomy with the shadow effect, like the anger, the angst was kind of represented on the shadow. So it had like this two sides to it. This next piece is called Once Upon a Time, Survival. I had this was a solo exhibition at the Snipe Museum at Notre Dame. And the centerpiece of that exhibition was this piece, which is a life-size little girl holding a hummingbird. And the hummingbird represents survival, because when a hummingbird doesn't have any food or it's too cold out, or it goes into hibernation that can last a day or two as a way to survive. So I really kind of like that, the notion, the idea of survival, and that's called torpor. So here's an image of that life-size sculpture of a little girl holding a hummingbird. Here's a life-size crocodile. I did some research on crocodiles, I guess maybe like in the 1800s, and crocodiles represented like they were talisman that were meant to ward off evil, ward off disease, and ward off ignorance. And during COVID, I thought that would be a great kind of just piece. And also, I think Trump was president, so it was a piece that I felt like needed to be made and hung. They were hung in like doorways in churches, apothecaries, and universities. This piece is called The Farm Worker. This piece was purchased by the Chrysler Museum for the permanent collection. It represents an immigrant worker that is being criminalized. And on his hands, there are the words written ni aquí ni allá, which means neither here nor there. Here's a close-up of the face. And, you know, I was trying to kind of emulate like the idea of like a broken man. This next group of slides was an exhibition I had at the Pittsburgh Glass Center called Cuando el Río Suena. It was also produced during the time of Trump. And there was a lot of things happening with, you know, immigrant children trying to come to the US to find a better life or to escape violence and persecution. And the kids were being put in detention centers without any due process. And in a lot of cases, they were being separated from their families. Some were coming here alone because of I would imagine because of desperation of trying to escape violence and persecution. So I created an exhibition around that what was going on at that time. So here's a little girl who got separated from her mom, and I made a sculpture that was in that of her, replicated a sculpture of her for that exhibition. Her name's Yanira. The angels represented some of the children that passed away under custody, and they basically passed away for, you know, unnecessarily for like minor things that could have easily been treated like the common flu. So there were, so I created about maybe 4 portraits of the actual children that passed away under custody. So that exhibition had like actual clothes of some of the immigrant children that was taken from them on detention and thrown away. So all their belongings would be thrown away in the trash can, and they were only left with their clothes on their backs. There's a cage that, you know, represents the detention centers had like fences that caged the children, basically. The most powerful part of that exhibition was handwritten letters by children that actually went through the process of migration. And my questions to them were, why did you leave your country? What hardships did you face along the journey? And what did you hope to achieve coming to the US? So I got about 100 handwritten notes of these children sharing their stories. The reason why this was so important is because, you know, during this kind of polarization of what's going on at the time, the politics behind it through our politicians and the media, obviously everybody has their opinions, but nobody was actually asking the children why they were doing it. So I thought it was important to give them voice and share their personal experiences and views on, you know, what they went through and what they were going through. Here's another image of kids with an idea of a wall kind of crossing the border. My next exhibition, and actually my most recent exhibition, was not at the Pittsburgh Glass Center. Sorry, I didn't update that. The most recent exhibition was at the Chrysler Museum, and it was a show called Dendrolatry. And I made this life-size glass sculpture of a tree as a way to create a meditative space for people to come and almost I was kind of inviting people to kind of be in a space where they can maybe participate in a ritual. And the ritual was them sharing a letter or a note talking about a loved one or anybody that maybe experienced hardships or death really through the time of COVID. So it was kind of a neutral space for any religion and any background of people to participate in this idea. And then all the letters were burned at the end of the exhibition as a way to kind of have those letters kind of transcend into a spiritual realm and maybe reach their loved ones. Here, I just wanted to show some of the process of those pieces. There's about 56 parts, and Fig Magniziato helped me produce a lot of these branches, so I had to give him a shout out. Here's an idea of, so you get kind of idea of scale when I was putting these together. Yeah, and then here's some more written notes that were also hanging. And then some of them were placed in the ground. So this is kind of like an earlier version of that. And you can see the full size of the tree there. And then here's where we ended up at the end of the exhibition. There was literally like thousands of letters and an overwhelming participation. And, you know, a lot of my exhibitions have that participatory element. And it was interesting talking to Anne and Nancy, because they were kind of suggesting that's kind of my way to collaborate. So I was collaborating with the viewer or the visitor. And I also did that with the Cuando Rio Suena exhibition, where I actually asked folks to share their migration stories as a way to be inclusive, but also to let people know and to share the idea that we're all immigrants, except for natives, obviously. So my WheatonArts experience, I wanted to get back to the love of art making and the love of craft. And when I started in my career, this is what I was making. I was making these vessels, and I love making them. They're so much fun. I just love technique. It's an intrinsic part of my whole art making process. And my first week or two, I was making decorative craft basically. And so Tiff Leps was a person from WheatonArts that helped me. She volunteered to help me assist me in doing these pieces. And then I also had another gentleman, Rob Warden from Pittsburgh, come for a week, and we basically produced a bunch of these vessels. So basically, it was just kind of tapping back into why I first kind of got into glass, and it's you know, I can't say this enough, but just WheatonArts is just so. It was so amazing to be able to just have the time to make whatever you want and literally use as much blow time as you want it to create whatever you want it. So this is one thing I've always wanted to go back to, but never had that space or time to do it. So I'm super grateful. So here's Tiff and Ish helping me make a homie. And the person that's not being shown is Charlotte Byro, my girlfriend. She was also helping me make this piece, even though she's not a glassblower, but it was really great to have that third person. So yeah, some of my homie series I was making while I was there as well. And I may have an image of one of the pieces. Next slide. Here is that other piece. And it might be, I think it's the piece I will be donating to Wheaton. And it's basically my feelings about what's currently happening. And you know, this piece is called Free Palestine. It also has a Palestine flag on its back. The other piece that I made is a life-size glass sculpture of a little girl who passed away. Her name is Hind Rajab, and I wanted to make a sculpture of her to commemorate her. She's basically 6 years old, was fleeing, and was literally, all her family was shot and killed in the van that they were fleeing, and she was on the telephone for about 2 hours. Her cousin was also alive, called emergency, and then he got shot. So she was on the telephone trying to get help, and they reached the paramedics. The paramedics went out, and they got permission from Israel to allow for the paramedics to come through, and then they were blown up by a tank. So the paramedics died, and then eventually the little girl was also killed. So it just kind of speaking about the horrors of war. I really like. I wanted to make this piece in particular because you can actually go on YouTube and hear her pleas and her wanting, trying to get help, and the humanity behind it. So so it kind of basically you can actually see that story on YouTube. Oh, teaching. One of the important things about my art practice is teaching and sharing my love of glass. I feel that one of the things that I feel is important is to touch youth, to really inspire youth, especially youth that don't have many resources in their communities. So it is my kind of one of my initiatives to really give back and work with youth of color, BIPOC youth mostly, but I welcome anyone. So I'm currently starting a glass blowing studio in Pittsburgh to kind of facilitate that. Next slide. Here's some of the youth I've worked with in Watts, LA. I think that's it. One of the slides that didn't come through was the goblets. I wanted to say that I did a week of goblets, and I had a woman come from Wisconsin. Her name is Chelsea Littman, and I wanted to give her a shout out and say thank you. Also, she helped me make goblets for a week. And the story behind that, real quick, is that I actually took a class with Michael Shunke 5 years ago and never had the time to actually practice the techniques that I learned in that class. But I had a bunch of videos that I took, and so one of the weeks at Wheaton, I actually just focused on making goblets, and Chelsea came out for a week and assisted me in producing goblets for a week. And I actually have some behind me. I can kind of show that real quick. But Chelsea also helped me make the sculpture of the little girl, and she did an amazing job. I just wanted to thank her, and Tiff and Ish and Charlotte and everyone at Wheaton Village who was so graceful in facilitating my time there. Thank you so much, Katie, also, and Pam and Alex.
Thank you, Jaime. I was hoping that you could address, you've talked about it separately, but not tonight, and the color application and your choice with the children to make them clear. Maybe you could speak a little bit more about that.
Sure. Both the exhibitions, Cuando el Río Suena, where the pieces were clear, and also Hind, and maybe some other future sculptures that might be making. Thanks, Kendall, around what's happening in the Middle East. Basically, I wanted to make the pieces clear because I wanted them to almost disappear, for them to be invisible, because in a way that they're kind of invisible to us. We don't know their stories, we don't know their names of these children in a lot of cases that are being that are dying currently in Palestine. There's thousands of children that are dying, and we don't know their names. We only know very few stories, like Hind's story. So I feel like having the clear and the talking to speak about the fragility of a child, if that answers your question.
Totally, no. I think it's a really impactful way to address those really difficult conversations. And I have a couple other questions, and I will happily ask a bunch of questions, but I also am encouraging anyone that is watching to pop your questions into the Q&A, and we'll have our artists answer those questions. So I have one for you, Jaime, and then a group question. So another thought, Jaime, you talk a little bit about getting back to your roots in glass blowing, and I'm really curious what your entry point into sculpting was and where that transition happened in your career.
Yeah, I always wanted to make artwork that was kind of more meaningful and had, was more personal. But in college, I felt during my undergrad, I felt that, that I just needed to get good at making things. I needed to learn technique and just basically acquire as much skill and technique as that I could. I saw Pino Signoretto come to my school in Northern California California College of the Arts. And when I saw him work, I just thought, what have I been doing for 4 years? His mastery was just kind of like unparalleled. And I just decided to focus and take a class with him. And I was fortunate enough to work with him in at Pilchuck in Seattle, and then visit his studio in Murano. So from those experiences, very few experiences, really catapulted my sculpture entry to really kind of produce figurative pieces, and just really, I mean, any kind of sculpture, really, just from what I was learning and what I was watching Pino Signoretto make, I think was the foundation for all the sculpture that I've done. But now I kind of just I've taken my own direction and just kind of more fluid with what techniques I use and but definitely Pino Signoretto was the first influence I really kind of my entry point into sculpture.
I guess tangentially with that, maybe I'll pass this to Anna and Nancy first, is you all have been educators in some capacity, whether that's formal or informal, and I think part of working with glass is this kind of educator teacher lens. But I'm curious how you negotiate that with your art practice, and also if you had any educators or mentors that um, inspired you to share your processes so openly. That's like 6 questions in one, but
A lot of questions. Uh, can you ask the first part of it again? Because I had a thought on that.
yeah, just kind of what you consider your role as artist and educator, and do those things connect, or do you see those as kind of separate parts of yourself?
No, I think they go together. They definitely go together. One informs the other. I've always learned a lot from my students, and that's just given. The give and take, the collaboration. Um, I'm not being very eloquent. The answer is yes. Uh, I've taught for so long, and I just take so much energy from teaching, and also it requires one to be very articulate about what one does. But when you first start teaching, I had no clue how to explain what it is to impart what it was that I was doing or wanted to say. And I'm not being very articulate here, but in the sense of teaching, it required me to break things down so that I understand things better, so that I can give the information over to someone else. And so I think that's helped me sort of slow down. And in teaching overseas, it's even harder or more challenging, teaching at places where they speak different languages. And in some cases, I teach places where there are 4 languages spoken, and I'm speaking English and it has to be translated several times. So I say 2 sentences, it's translated, and I wait 2 minutes, and then I say something else. And it's an interesting way of understanding, sort of in slow motion. Mentors. Excuse me, in grad school, I worked in glass. Before that, I worked in sculpture. I had a degree in sculpture. So I'd say my glass mentors were my teachers in grad school, and that's John Clark and Bonnie Diggs.
I can answer too. I've taught kids K-9 for a long time, and then on the university level for 25 years, something like that. Some at one point at the same time. And I think I've thought about this quite a bit, like 2 things. One, one role that I felt like was a role that I was able to do that meant a lot to me was to be able to help people, whether they be children or college students, find the way to do the work they love that makes them feel good, right? So that, like, how can you help someone find the way, right? Like, you know, what, and to watch them, like, all of a sudden when it clicks, like when someone has, like, is really proud of something they've done or is excited about an idea, or, you know, kind of takes something and moves with it, like, that was the thing that I absolutely loved. So I felt like my role was to sort of, I think that was one of the things I was best at. And then I had another experience. I taught for 20 years at Queens College, and sometimes I would have a repeat student in a different class. And one time, one of them said to me, "So what I like about your class is it's like we're learning life lessons along with art." And so I thought, yeah, like, I feel like I'm helping them figure out how to be adults in the world. And, you know, that's part of being a teacher, you know, to, like, how to make their way in the world. And I had two excellent sculpture teachers. So my undergraduate was in ceramics and my graduate degree was in sculpture. And I think that what the two people had in common, and they were both really tough, but what was good about them was that they let me know that they believed in me, and and that they believed that I could make work that was good, and they would help me see what was good and what wasn't good in what I was doing. Like, this is what I'm getting from what you're doing, and then is that what you want to be saying? And that's the thing that I've tried to sort of, you know, model. Like, this is what I'm getting out of this. Is this what you want me to be getting out of this? And then also to try and help students see that, to help them see behind the obvious, you know, to go beyond.
Interesting. What about you, Jaime? What are your, you've talked a little bit about being an educator, but I'm curious how you're blending those things as you look towards the future with your studio space.
Yeah. So the question is, how do I see, can you ask the question again, please?
Yeah, I kind of rambled in the question, so I think I'm changing it a little bit for each of you. But
I like
you
what
know,
everybody, I don't know what the initial question was.
yeah, I think I'm curious about your role as an artist and also as a teacher or educator, and
Yeah.
how those things might blend, or are they separate? And I know you mentioned Pino, but if there's anyone else that has kind of impacted you.
I feel like I get a lot of impact from different sources that are non-glass related, but just like inspiration from just my environments. But as far as educating, I feel that yeah, I feel like it's kind of part of my art practice to be an educator. And one of my close friends one time told me, "Well, why are you even an artist? Like, why don't you just focus on educating and serving the community?" And I thought, well, being an artist is a good role model. It's like, they go hand in hand. So being a practicing artist and having somewhat of a successful career can be inspiring to these young kids that are trying to get into something, or maybe find a future in it. So, and not only that, like, just also being able to teach what it means to be an artist, and the ins and outs, and, like, what it takes, and how to get there.
I agree about that.
I think it also gives permission to people who are trying to be artists. It's because it's a scary endeavor. It's not easy. And
Yeah.
I've never met anyone who thinks it is to navigate the world as an artist. So it gives them hope if they see their mentors, their teachers having successes.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think it's really important to have that you're offering more than one thing. You're not just teaching them about process or technique or ideas, concepts. You're also teaching them how to be an artist, and what that means, which is a whole nother part of it.
Right. And it's not just the successes, it's the struggles too, and the keeping,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Going. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. exactly.
There's a certain vulnerability to sharing your practice and your life, and also trying to be a role model all at once. So, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I did just get a question about what your next steps are after your fellowship ends. Where are you going with this work, or your lives, or your practices?
This for all of us?
All of you. Who wants to start?
I'll let you start.
Gosh. Uh, well, Nancy and I have a couple of truckloads of floats to take back to our individual studios.
The plan is to bring it to my studio where there's more space and, get together, periodically for chunks of time while we both work separately on our own work at the same time to kind of process everything that's happened, and like start to bring some of the pieces to completion and then see where we might be able to, show the
The
work.
hope is to have an exhibition, obviously.
But we're not done
Yeah,
by a long shot
we're
with this work.
far away from that.
I just want to say that it was so amazing to share the space with you and to see your process. The amount of work you've created and you are creating, and the energy between the both of you was just so inspiring to see, and it's just so mind blowing how much you were able to produce and how many different projects and experiments, and like, I just really felt you really utilized the environment, the space, the molds, and the history and everything, and just so beautifully. So it was really humbling to see, you both work and be in when the space with you. I feel like I got a lot out of it, and I learned something.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
I feel my process a little bit more like focused, but I was just I had an agenda, very specific, very different, but it was great to be in that energy with them.
We all
With you.
worked really hard.
And
I think that's what's really kind of unique about the fellowship is everyone comes at it from different backgrounds and perspectives and methods of making, and so it's exciting to see how that all can come together for a few short weeks.
yeah,
So Pam's jumped back on. Before we wrap up, maybe Jaime, what's next for you?
I have no idea. As far as art, I feel like I definitely want to continue to make art that speaks about what's happening in Palestine. I feel that it's just something that's kind of I'm very passionate about right now. I support all the students that are protesting and everyone that's trying to create change in what's happening. I wish and I hope that our government changes direction in their perspective. So yeah, that, and also just right now, I'm really focusing on getting my studio finished. So the next few weeks and months are going to be my energy is going to be focused on getting everything ready for me to start working with youth. That's kind of where my mind is right now.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for spending this time preparing these presentations and sitting with us and talking about everything that inspires you and the directions that it takes you in. And I'm incredibly happy that all of you have integrated so well into the studio community, both on site at Wheaton and beyond, because as you know, our community at Wheaton is an extended one, and we're very pleased about that. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And please don't be strangers. We want to see you.
You will.
Thank you, everybody else who has joined us for this program. I do encourage you to follow Anna, Nancy, and Jaime. I have their social media handles up on the screen, as well as their websites and their emails. As you may be aware, this program has been recorded and will be posted. So if you would like to go back to any of these slides and see their contact information or read their biographies, that will be available on our YouTube channel in the future. I also encourage everybody to register for the next Wheaton conversation, We will be joined by our next round of Creative Glass Fellowship recipients, Lily Wilkins and Brianna Glusak. They are our summer 2024 session recipients, and they will join us on Thursday, June 20th, and at 6 p.m. as usual. As always, I'd love to hear from those who are either new to this series or to Wheaton Arts. Please feel free to contact me with any questions or comments that you may have about the program. Feel free to download the chat or to reach out to me through email, and I can provide that to you. I sincerely thank you for joining us, and I hope you join us for future programs. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.